What would happen if the Earth lost the moon? Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that the moon has disappeared forever. It would not just be an emptier sky. It would be the first day of a slow collapse. Without its gravitational anchor, the oceans would lose nearly 70% of their tides. The sea would become a still and stagnant mirror, and the life that pulses along the coasts of the world would begin to fade within days. But the real chaos would not be in the water, but in the sky. Without the moon to hold it steady, Earth's axis would begin to wobble out of control, tilting so far that a single location would experience 6 months of scorching sun and 6 months of frozen darkness. And spinning faster, winds of over 200 kilometers per hour would sweep across the surface without rest. The nights would plunge into a darkness that humanity has never known, leaving thousands of species blind, species that always relied on its light. Even our invisible shield, the magnetic field that protects us, would slowly weaken, leaving the planet exposed to the radiation of space. The moon was never a simple ornament in the night. It is the support that keeps our world alive. And one unsettling question remains: how long would humanity survive on an Earth completely alone? Good evening. I know the question we opened with tonight sounds unsettling. A world without the moon, a planet adrift in the darkness. But I want you to breathe easy, because tonight you are not going to suffer that catastrophe. You are going to observe it from a distance, comfortable and safe, like someone watching a storm from the other side of a window, wrapped in a blanket, without a single drop touching you. Because that is what we are here, you and I, two travelers gazing into a world that almost never existed. A world where our faithful silver companion has vanished from the sky forever, and where the Earth must learn to spin alone. Tonight we are going to wander through that world, slowly, without rushing, discovering one by one over 100 things that would change if the moon disappeared. Some will surprise you for their immensity: oceans that go still, skies that tilt, nights darker than any night a human being has ever seen. Others will surprise you for how small and close they are, like the fact that, perhaps, without the moon, you would never have been born. But I will tell you about that later. For now, you do not have to remember anything. You do not have to understand every piece of data or follow every word. You just have to let yourself be carried along. I will take care of holding the story. You just listen, and let the world slowly fade around you. If you enjoy this kind of content, this small corner made so that the weight of the day dissolves and rest arrives without effort, subscribe, only if you want to. No commitment, no noise. And now, before we cross the threshold into that distant world, prepare yourself for the journey. Adjust the pillows until they support your head, without you having to do anything. Lower the light in the room, or turn it off completely, until only a soft, warm glow remains. Feel the weight of the blankets over your body, that warm pressure that seems to tell you there is nothing left to do, nothing to solve, nowhere to go. Take a deep breath, just one. Fill your chest slowly, and as you let the air out, let your shoulders drop, let your jaw loosen, let the entire day stay behind. You are ready. The sky is clear, the stars are already waiting, and up there, for the last time in this story, the moon shines. Close your eyes if you want. You will not need them to see what comes next. Let us begin. the beacon that goes dark. Imagine the exact instant the moon disappears. There would be no explosion, no cosmic sound, no violent jolt across the sky, only a sudden silence. If the moon vanished at this very second, your eyes would not know it immediately. Light, that tireless messenger traveling through the void, takes exactly 1.3 seconds to cross the frozen expanse of space and reach your retina. During that brief sigh of the universe, you would still see its silver glow in the sky, a phantom echo of something that no longer exists. And then, without warning, the sky would empty. The darkness that would follow that instant would not be simply the absence of light. It would be a darkness with weight, with texture. The full moon, though 400,000 times fainter than the sun, provides an illumination that our eyes and our instincts have known since the birth of humanity. Without its presence, our nights would become up to 10 times darker, returning us to the primordial darkness our ancestors knew before fire illuminated their caves. The very tone of the night would change completely. That bluish-white glow that bathes landscapes and turns fields into silver stages would no longer exist. Everything would be tinted solely by the yellowish, distant light of the stars, a warmer illumination, but infinitely weaker, one that would barely manage to outline the silhouettes of trees or mountains in the distance. And we would lose something more, one of the most beautiful coincidences in the entire solar system. The apparent size of the moon in our sky is almost exactly the same as that of the sun. That unique coincidence is what gives us total eclipses, that awe-inspiring moment when day becomes night and a crown of white fire is drawn around a black disk. Without the moon, that halo would disappear forever. The sun would simply be a bright sphere, without a companion capable of covering it, and the sky would lose one of its most sacred spectacles. But the change would not only be visual. The moon's gravity subtly deforms the Earth's crust. Our planet is not a perfect sphere. It is slightly stretched by the attraction of its companion. If the moon disappeared, the Earth would no longer be stretched. Its own shape, along with the distribution of the oceans, would begin to relax very slowly, like a muscle finally releasing a tension it has held for billions of years. We would also lose our oldest clock. The lunar phases, that constant cycle of waxing, full, waning, and new, gave us the measure of time at a glance. Looking up was knowing what point of the month we were in. Without its crescent and its waning, the night sky would seem frozen, an immobile backdrop that no longer marks the passage of weeks. Astronomers, moreover, would lose their nearest laboratory. A great deal of what we know about how planets evolve is based on the crater scars we can observe on the moon with the naked eye. It is an open book of geological history, a record of the bombardments the early solar system endured, a silent testimony to our own vulnerability. Without it, we would lose the Rosetta Stone of planetary astronomy, the page that taught us to read the language of worlds. And as that first moonless night progressed, you would notice that something else has changed. The cold arrives sooner. Without a nearby body that reflects and subtly returns the warmth of the day, the night's temperature would drop faster the moment the sun set. The air would become heavier, more piercing, biting the skin with a swiftness unknown on moonlit nights, when the ground and the air still retain a faint residual warmth. The shadows, Those that today are sharp and silvery under the direct light of the full moon would vanish. Everything would become a soft chiaroscuro, without defined edges, only diffuse silhouettes that blend into the background. Trees, rocks, and houses would lose their sharp contours, transforming into vague and dreamlike shapes that barely suggest themselves in the half-light. The difference in light would be abysmal, and the body would notice it. The brightness of the full moon is barely 0.25 lux, a light sufficient to make out a path or read the lines of a map. By contrast, the combined light of all the stars in the sky reaches barely 0.0001 lux. Our eyes would take much longer to adapt to this new darkness, and the pupil would remain dilated, searching for a source of light that no longer exists. And do not think this would be a distant phenomenon, reserved for astronomers. You would notice it yourself, at your own window. On the first moonless night, leaning out, you would take a few moments to understand what is missing. The sky would still be full of stars, but something in the landscape would feel different, flatter, more sunken into itself. The rooftops, the paths, the trees in the background, everything that the moonlight used to trace with a silver stroke, would dissolve into a uniform and featureless gloom. The ancient civilizations, which for thousands of years had organized their lives around that bright disk, would be left without their most reliable nighttime compass. And we, modern heirs of that same habit, would discover just how deeply we remain tied, in our innermost selves, to the rhythm of a celestial body we took for granted. There was a time, not so long ago, when humanity looked at that gray surface and populated it with imagination. Until barely 2 centuries ago, many thinkers sincerely believed the moon was inhabited, that beneath that sky of dry seas lived strange creatures adapted to their silent world. That illusion, though mistaken, fueled human curiosity and pushed us to look beyond our own horizon. Without the moon, we would also lose that old dream, that first frontier the human mind tried to cross, long before it had ships to do so. Think for a moment about what that new silence means. Today, even on the darkest night, the full moon gives us company. Its light slips between the curtains, illuminates the path of someone returning home late, traces a silver trail across the sea. It is such a constant presence that we do not even notice it until it is gone. And when it was gone, the nocturnal world would become a deeper, more ancient place, and, for the first time in the history of our species, completely ours and no one else's. It is worth pausing on that number because it says a great deal. 1.3 seconds. That is how long its light takes to reach us, and therefore how long we would continue seeing a moon that no longer exists. In that tiny instant, you would live in 2 realities at once, one in which the moon still shines, and another, the true one, in which it is already gone. It is the most intimate proof that the light we see is always, in a sense, a memory. We look at the past every time we raise our eyes to the sky. And when that memory faded, what would come next would not be the immediate chaos of the movies, but something far more subtle and, for that very reason, more unsettling. The sky would simply have a hole, a space where throughout all of human history there had always been something, and where now there would be nothing. A void shaped like an absence. Some say we do not miss things until they are gone. With the moon, it it would happen in the most literal way possible. That soft light we never asked for, never thanked, took for granted night after night, would suddenly reveal itself as one of the most constant gifts of our existence. And the first dark night would teach us, in just a few minutes, everything that Silent Companion had been doing for us without our ever realizing it. Imagine a child who asks where the moon is, and an adult who does not know what to answer. Imagine telescopes aimed at an empty point in the sky. Imagine the old lullabies that mentioned it, now speaking of something the youngest will never get to see. An entire culture built around a celestial body would have to relearn, slowly, how to live without it. There is something more that would be lost on that first night, something difficult to name. The full moon has a color of its own, a cold bluish white that tints the world in silver, that turns an ordinary field into a dreamscape and a dark sea into a sheet of mercury. That color, that atmosphere, has inspired artists and lovers throughout all of history. Without the moon, the night would retain only the warm, faint tone of distant stars, the sea that forgets how to breathe. The ocean is the liquid heart of the earth, and its rhythm has been set for eons by the gravitational pull of the moon. Without that pull, the tides would lose nearly 2/3 of their intensity. The moon is responsible for almost 70% of the force that draws the oceans toward the shore. Without it, only the solar tides would remain, far weaker, a distant echo of the movement we know today. The waves, which today break against the rocks with the force of a giant, would become a soft and lazy swell of barely 30 centimeters. Imagine standing at the shore. The water would lap at the sand, with almost no force, without that constant roar that calms the mind. It would be a nearly imperceptible back and forth, like the breathing of someone sleeping deeply, without jolts, without energy. Without lunar gravity, the ocean water would slowly redistribute toward the poles due to the Earth's centrifugal force. Imagine the maps of the world redrawing themselves with a silent slowness. Vast expanses of water would accumulate at the extremes of the globe, flooding the northern and southern coasts, while the areas near the equator would see sea levels drop. And without the constant pumping of the tides, the water would become stagnant. The sea would lose its natural cleansing. Its coasts would go still, accumulating sediments that no one would drag back anymore. The global ocean currents, which act as the planet's veins transporting heat from the equator to the poles, would weaken dramatically. That circulation system is what keeps the oceans alive and oxygenated. Without the impulse of the tides, the deep water, rich in nutrients, would stop rising to the surface. The cycle that feeds all marine life would be interrupted, transforming the oceans into calmer bodies of water, yes, but also poorer, quieter ones. The sound of the waves on the beach would change forever. The constant roar of the spring tides would be replaced by an almost inaudible whisper, a splash so faint it would barely disturb the sand. That sound, which today so many people use as a natural companion to fall asleep, would transform into a liquid silence, soft and deep. Even the texture of the sand would be different. Today, the strong tides reshape the coast every 12 hours, compacting the sand and mixing it with new sediments, creating those ripples we feel underfoot when walking along the shore. Without that movement, the sand would settle, smooth and uniform, like the floor of a room no one has stepped in for years. And the smell of the sea would change as well. With less water moving and breaking at the shore, the oxygenation of the coast would decrease. The air, which today smells of fresh salt and that clean aroma released by waves when they burst, would become denser, more stagnant, like that of a pond that has sat still under the sun for too long. The ecosystems of the intertidal zone, those strips of life between land and sea that dry and flood without rest, would collapse entirely. Their inhabitants, from tiny crabs to anemones and starfish, are adapted to that relentless rhythm of exposure to air and submersion in water. Without the tidal cycle, they could not survive, and the coastal rocks would be left bare, covered only by a silent slime. Nearly all marine animals depend on the tides at some stage of their lives. That cycle is fundamental to the reproduction and feeding of the oceans. The nutrients that the tides drag from the coast toward the open sea are the sustenance of the planet's largest food chains. Without the moon's pull, that cycle would stop, and the ocean would begin a slow and inevitable process of impoverishment. The artisanal fishermen, who have read the sea for generations, would lose their oldest guide. Relying on the spring tides of the full moon, they know when the sea brings the best catches, when the fish approach the coast to feed. Without that rhythm, their ancestral knowledge, passed down from parents to children, would become obsolete, leaving a void as deep as the silence of the sea itself. In places famous for their extreme tides, like the Bay of Fundy, where the water can rise more than 15 meters, would be completely transformed. That bay, which today is a spectacle of nature with its walls of water advancing over the land, would become a calm and shallow inlet. Its cliffs would be left exposed, and the magic that draws thousands of visitors would vanish, replaced by a permanent and somewhat melancholic calm. Think of the traditional salt flats, those expanses of shallow water where the sun evaporates the sea to leave behind crystalline salt. They depend entirely on the ebb and flow of the tides to fill naturally. Without that movement, they would disappear, and with them a trade that has fed coastal communities for thousands of years, a way of life as ancient as civilization itself. Even the technology we take for granted would lose its purpose. The apps that today predict tides and currents, that guide sailors and fishermen, would be left without function. Coastal navigation would once again depend solely on the observation of winds and stars, as in the times when sailors read the sky to keep from getting lost, entrusting their lives to memory and intuition. And the lifeguards, the sentinels of every beach in the world, would lose their most basic safety tool. Today, tide tables allow them to anticipate dangerous currents, to know when the sea turns treacherous. Without the moon, those currents would no longer follow any recognizable pattern. The sea would become a more unpredictable place, watched with a constant and exhausting vigilance. Even surfers, who live chasing the perfect wave, would see their world disappear. Without the moon's gravitational push, many beaches would lose their power and their rhythm. The ocean would transform into a flat and predictable surface, stripped of that wild energy that for generations attracted those who sought to measure themselves against its waves. Imagine, for a moment, the sound of such a beach. Today the sea breaks with that deep and constant roar that so many people use to calm themselves, to sleep, to feel that the world is still on course. On an earth without the moon, that roar would fade. There would remain barely a whisper, the timid brush of water against sand, so faint you would have to lean in close to hear it. The sea would not die, but it would fall silent, forever keeping the memory of a time when it sang with all its strength. Pause for a moment and imagine a specific coastline. A fishing village at dawn, with its boats moored, its nets spread, and the smell of salt floating in the air. For generations, the life of that village has followed the pulse of the tides. When to go out to sea, when to return, where and when the fish are plentiful. All that knowledge, passed down in hushed tones from parents to children over centuries, is based on a single invisible master in the sky. Without the moon, that master would fall silent, and the knowledge of generations would be left, suddenly, with nothing to hold on to. And think about the tiny life of the shore, the kind we almost never look at. The small crabs that hide in the wet sand, the snails clinging to the rocks, the anemones that open and close with the sway of the water. All of them live on a frontier, that narrow world between land and sea that the tides create twice a day. Without that tide, the frontier disappears. And with it, an entire universe of creatures that had spent millions of years inhabiting precisely that shifting boundary between two worlds. The stagnant water would even change its color and its microscopic life. Without the constant movement that oxygenates and mixes, certain coastal zones would become murky, thick, dominated by organisms that thrive in stillness. The crystalline sea we know, that blue that invites us to dive in, would cloud over in many places, losing the transparency that today seems eternal to us. And yet, there would be a strange peace in that sleeping sea. Imagine a bay at sunset, without a single wave, smooth as a pane of glass, reflecting the entire sky without distortion. It would have lost its force, its roar, its life. But in return, it would offer an almost unreal calm. The calm of an ocean that has finally stopped breathing and has remained, forever, asleep. Pause to think about something as everyday as a salt marsh at sunset. Those wetlands where land and water blur together, where thousands of birds feed in the mud, the tides exposed twice a day, crabs, worms, small mollusks buried in the silt, an entire feast that reveals itself and hides again with the rhythm of the water. Without the tides, that feast would disappear. The birds that travel thousands of kilometers to feed in those marshes would arrive at a transformed, silent place, incapable of sustaining them. And the chain would break one link higher, and another, and another. Think also of the great deltas, where rivers meet the sea. Today, the tides push salt water inland, and then pull it back, in a constant breathing that keeps those unique ecosystems alive. The mangroves, those forests that grow with their roots in salt water, depend entirely on the back and forth. Without it, the mangroves would drown or dry out, and with them the natural nurseries where countless fish species are born and grow in safety before venturing into the open sea would disappear. And yet, amid all that loss, there would be an image of serene beauty. Imagine a bay under a starlit sky. Without a single wave, its surface turned into a black and perfect mirror, reflecting the entire galaxy. The sea would have lost its force, its voice, its heartbeat, but it would offer, in return, an absolute stillness that, of an ocean finally at rest, asleep beneath a sky full of stars that double themselves in its motionless waters. And think of a chilling detail. The great coastal cities of the world were built counting on the tides. Ports, dikes, drains, everything is designed around that twice daily rise and fall of the water. Without the tides, those ports would be stranded in stagnant waters. The systems that clean the bays would stop working, and millions of people would discover that their relationship with the sea, which seemed eternal, actually depended entirely on the chaotic dance of the axis. Our planet is not a static sphere suspended in the void. It is a gigantic spinning top, rotating on itself as it travels its orbit around the sun. That movement is not perfect, but it is stable. The Earth maintains a tilt of about 23.5 degrees, a precise angle that gives us the seasons: the gentle spring, the warm summer, the golden autumn, and the silent winter. And that stability is not an accident. It is the result of a delicate balance, sustained by the constant presence of the moon, which acts as an invisible anchor, a counterweight that holds the Earth's axis in place and prevents it from wobbling. If that anchor disappeared, the Earth would lose control. The axis would begin to oscillate chaotically. It would not be a change you could feel in a single day, but a slow and inexorable drift over millions of years. Without the force holding it in place, the tilt could vary wildly, deviating as far as 45 or even 80 degrees. And this is not pure speculation. We have an example right next door. In our own neighborhood, Mars has only 2 tiny moons, too small to exert any stabilizing influence. That is why the axis of Mars varies extremely over geological time, tilting without restraint. Without our large moon, the Earth would face the same fate, becoming a world of extremes impossible to predict. Imagine what that would mean. If the axis tilted enough, a single location on the planet could experience 6 months with the pole pointing directly at the sun, under a continuous and scorching light that never turns off, followed by 6 months of total, frozen darkness, plunged into an endless night. The seasons, those predictable cycles that have ordered life and agriculture throughout all of human history, would cease to exist. In their place, there would be only extremes, uninhabitable frontiers between fire and ice. But the axis would not be the only thing to change. So would the very rhythm of our days. Today, the Earth's rotation slows very gradually due to the friction that lunar tides exert on the oceans and the crust. It is the moon, in silence, that has been smoothing our spin for billions of years. Without that break, the Earth would maintain its speed, but would stop decelerating. And if the moon had disappeared eons ago, today our planet would spin much faster. Days would last barely 6 to 8 hours. And a world that spins faster is a world of furious winds. The force that deflects air and forms the great storm systems intensifies with rotational speed. On an Earth with such short days, the winds would be far more violent, routinely exceeding 200 kilometers per hour. They would not be passing storms, but a constant roar, sweeping the surface, shaping the landscape, and making life nearly impossible in the most exposed areas. There is also a deeper effect, hidden in the very heart of the planet. Some models suggest that the moon's tidal forces help keep the Earth's outer core in motion, that ocean of liquid metal whose slow churning generates our magnetic field. Without that constant stimulation, the planet's great dynamo could lose strength over time. And our magnetic field is far more than a curiosity. It is the invisible shield that deflects the sun's radiation and the particle wind that would otherwise slowly strip away our atmosphere. That is exactly what is believed to have happened to Mars. Billions of years ago, the red planet had rivers, lakes, and a dense atmosphere. But its magnetic field shut down, its shield fell, and the solar wind dragged its air into space until it became the cold, dead desert we know today. An Earth without the moon could very slowly begin to walk that same path. And all of this, together, would unleash something even greater: the collapse of climate. An erratic axis, stronger winds, reduced tides, and weakened ocean currents would create a planet with absolutely unpredictable weather. The great currents that distribute heat around the world, like the Gulf Stream that warms the coasts of half the planet, depend in part on the mixing effect of the tides. Without them, some regions would overheat beyond remedy, while others would sink into permanent cold. And this movement, as slow as it is majestic, has an even slower sibling: precession. The Earth's axis, in addition to spinning, traces an enormous circle in the sky, like a top that takes nearly 26,000 years to complete a single revolution. Without the moon's influence, that cosmic dance would change its rhythm, slowly altering the way the stars appear to move across our sky over the ages. The star that today points north would cease to do so, and the sky maps that humanity spent millennia drawing would become, little by little, obsolete. But hold on to this image, because it best summarizes the entire chapter. The moon is, for the Earth, what the weight of a balancing pole is for a tightrope walker. It seems like a minor detail, almost an accessory, and yet it is precisely that weight that allows the walker to move along the rope without falling. Take it away, and the tightrope walker, who seemed to command the air, begins to wobble. That is how delicate, and that is how profound, the relationship between our planet and its old silver companion truly is. It is worth truly imagining what those 6 months of continuous sun would be like. Not the summer we know, with its cool nights that offer a reprieve, but a sun that never sets, circling the sky without ever touching the horizon, heating the land without rest for half a year. Lakes would evaporate, soils would crack, and when darkness finally arrived, it would come all at once, plunging that same region into half a year of night and a cold capable of freezing everything. No living being we know of could adapt to such extreme oscillations. And although we are talking about millions of years, it is worth remembering that the Earth has already known instability. What the moon gives us, in truth, is something precious and rare: constancy. A climate stable enough, for long enough, for life not only to appear, but to have the luxury of growing complex, of diversifying, of giving rise to creatures as improbable as ourselves. That stability is the invisible ground upon which everything we are was built. To truly understand what an uncontrolled axis would mean, one need only look at Uranus, that distant planet that literally spins on its side, lying on its orbit. On Uranus, the poles face the sun for decades at a time, plunging each hemisphere into summers and winters that last for years. An Earth without the moon could, over time, approach something similar. A world so tilted that the very notions of day, night, and season would lose all meaning. And those 6-hour days deserve to be properly imagined. The sun would race across the sky, rising and setting 3 or 4 times in what today lasts a single day. Life would have to adapt to a constant flickering of light and darkness, without time for the Earth to cool completely or to warm up fully. It would be an accelerated, nervous world, battered without rest by winds that never die down. Nothing like the slow and gentle rhythm to which life, and we ourselves, are accustomed. The Earth, without its dance partner, would lose the grace of its movement. It would cease to be the elegant, stable top we know and become an erratic body, struggling to find a new balance in the dark immensity of space, while its winds howl and its poles freeze or scorch in a slow and merciless cycle. And yet, even in that chaos, life would seek a way to carry on. Time without its mirror. Before hourglasses existed, before bronze gears marked the hours in city towers, and long before atoms vibrated in precision laboratories, humanity learned to measure time by looking up. Most likely, we took our first steps in astronomy by observing the moon. It was the brightest, closest, and most changing object in the night sky. It was not a fixed point like the stars, but a companion that was born, grew, filled with light, waned, and disappeared only to begin again. That constant cycle became our first textbook of the universe, a celestial blackboard where we learned to count the days, to foresee the seasons, and to understand that the cosmos had a predictable and comforting rhythm. That influence is so deep it remains etched in the words we use every day. In a great many languages, the word for month shares its root with the word for moon. It is an ancient echo, a reminder of how we measured time when our only tool was the sky. Each cycle of the moon marked a new period of sowing, of hunting, or of rest, ordering human life in blocks of roughly 29 days. The great civilizations understood this and dedicated immense resources to its study. The Babylonians, the Egyptians, and the Maya built stone observatories, aligned with astonishing precision, solely to track the moon's path. Their scholars spent entire nights atop those structures, feeling the cold of the rock beneath their feet and the breeze on their faces, predicting its phases and planning the harvests that would keep their people alive. Those temples were not merely buildings, they were giant instruments designed to capture the movement of our satellite. For millennia, the behavior of the sea was a mystery wrapped in mythology. Before gravity was explained, humanity believed the tides were the ocean's breathing, the breath of sea gods or spiritual forces that responded to rituals. The idea that an invisible celestial body could pull billions of tons of water across entire continents was simply unimaginable. The moon was, for them, a divine mystery, not an object, subject to the laws of physics. And our gaze was also limited by our beliefs. For centuries it was taught that the moon was a perfect, immaculate sphere, made of a celestial matter different from the Earth. It was not until Galileo pointed his first telescope at the sky, just over 400 years ago, that that illusion was shattered. Through that glass tube he saw mountains, valleys, and irregular craters. That vision humanized the sky, proving that the worlds up there were made of the same rock and the same dust as our own ground, and it brought the cosmos closer to a reality we could touch. That knowledge, in turn, was the compass that allowed the exploration of the world. The Polynesian navigators crossed the vastness of the Pacific, one of the most extraordinary feats in history, guided by the stars and, crucially, by the moon. Without its light to illuminate the wave crests and reveal the water's patterns at night, that exploration would have been nearly impossible. They read the sea like an open book, and the moon was the lamp that allowed them to decipher its pages in the darkness. On solid ground, traditional farmers have sown for millennia following the lunar phases. With their hands buried in the damp earth and the smell of recent rain in the air, they believed the waxing moon favored the growth of leaves and fruit, while the waning moon drew energy toward the roots. Regardless of what science says today about those practices, we would lose that ancestral guide, a ritual that tied the work of the field to the cycles of the cosmos. And that connection reaches into the heart of our traditions. A great many religious and cultural festivals around the world follow lunar calendars. The disappearance of the moon would disorder the spiritual calendar of humanity, uprooting celebrations that have set the rhythm of faith and community for thousands of years. The nights of fasting, reflection, or festivity would lose their marker in the sky, cast adrift in a time without sacred cycles. Some peoples gave each full moon a name according to the changes in nature. The strawberry moon in summer, the ice moon in winter. We would lose those small monthly poems that united the sky with the earth, names that did not just describe a phenomenon, but told the story of the survival, the hunting, and the harvest of an entire people. Let us think about what it would mean for our most intimate culture. The moon has been, throughout all of history, humanity's silent muse. Poets have dedicated millions of verses to it, using it as a symbol of love, of nostalgia, of the passage of time, and of solitude. Painters have portrayed it over calm seas and sleeping cities. Lovers have walked beneath its light, and mothers have lulled their children to sleep, pointing at it through the window. Without the moon, all that treasure of symbols would be orphaned, and art would have to search among the stars for a colder, more distant, less intimate beauty than that of our old companion. And let us also think about children. The generations born in that world would never know the magic of searching for shapes on the surface of the full moon, nor the experience of walking through a field bathed in its silver light. Their very idea of the night would be different, darker and emptier, stripped of that playmate that for countless generations accompanied the human imagination from earliest childhood. Even language would change. Those expressions we use without thinking to ask for the moon, to be over the moon, to promise the moon, would lose their root, their meaning, their poetry. They are phrases that only exist because, for thousands of years, that celestial body was there, shining, inspiring us, reminding us that something beautiful and unreachable hung above our heads every night. Imagine those first astronomers, thousands of years ago, standing atop a stone tower, wrapped in cloaks to shield themselves from the cold of the early morning. They had no telescopes, No clocks, no maps. They had only the sky, their patience, and their wonder. And night after night, they watched the moon trace its path, noting every change, every phase, every eclipse, until they discovered that it hid an order, a rhythm that could be predicted. That was one of the first great triumphs of the human mind, understanding that the cosmos was not chaos, but music. From that wonder came the calendars, and from the calendars came civilization. Knowing when to sow, when to harvest, when to store provisions for the winter, all depended on measuring time. And humanity's first clock was the moon. In a certain sense, every city, every planned harvest, every festival we still celebrate sinks its roots into those long nights when a handful of human beings looked up and dared to keep count. That is why losing the moon would not just be losing a light. It would be losing the first teacher our species ever had, the one who taught us to think about time, to anticipate the future, to trust that tomorrow the sky would behave as it did today. That was perhaps the greatest gift of all, the certainty of an order, the silent promise that the universe is, at its core, a place that can be trusted. Imagine the great stone monuments that dot the planet, those circles and alignments that ancient cultures raised with titanic effort. Many of them are oriented with precision toward the movements of the sun and the moon, capable of marking a solstice or announcing an eclipse. They were calendars of rock, temples, and observatories at once. Without the moon, half their meaning would have been lost, and those millennial stones would today be an even deeper enigma, mute witnesses to a sky that no longer exists. And think of the great festivities that still today order the lives of billions of people, celebrations whose dates are decided by observing the moon. Each year, entire communities look up, waiting to see the first waxing crescent to begin a sacred month, or wait for the full moon to celebrate a harvest. Without it, all that spiritual calendar would be suspended in the air, and humanity would have to reinvent, from scratch, the way it marks its most sacred moments. And this fear of losing the moon is not new. 2 centuries ago, poets were already writing about the melancholy of imagining a night without it, proving that human unease before its possible absence has been a sentiment shared throughout time. We sensed, even then, that a sky without that silver beacon would be an incomplete sky, a ceiling of the world missing its central jewel. The clocks of nature. Life on Earth does not only adapt to space, but also to time. And that time, for billions of years, has been set by the double rhythm of the sun and the moon. Without the satellite, the internal clocks of countless species, including our own, would suffer a massive desynchronization. Those biological clocks, tuned over eons to respond to light and darkness, would lose their nighttime reference, plunging ecosystems into a silent and profound confusion. Imagine a white sand beach beneath the night. Newly hatched sea turtles break through their shells and emerge onto the surface. By ancestral instinct, they seek the brightest horizon to orient themselves toward the water. That brightness does not come from human lights, but from the reflection of moonlight on the ocean. Without the moon, that natural beacon disappears. The tiny turtles, blind in the absolute darkness, would become lost en masse, walking in circles or heading toward the dry interior of the beaches, far from the safety of the sea. Beneath the surface of the water, the drama repeats itself on the coral reefs. These vibrant ecosystems carry out massive spawning events, perfectly synchronized with the phases of the moon. On a specific night, millions of corals simultaneously release their gametes into the water, in an act of fertilization that depends entirely on that light signal. Without the moon, that coordinated reproduction would collapse. The reefs, already fragile as they are, would lose their ability to regenerate, threatening the thousands of species that depend on them. In the forests and mountains, nocturnal animals would face a new world of shadows. Owls, bats, and great cats depend on the faint light of the moon to hunt. That soft illumination allows them to distinguish the movement of their prey in the undergrowth. Without it, their success rate would plummet. They would have to relearn everything, relying only on hearing or smell, or simply disappear from an environment they no longer know how to decipher. Wolves, whom we often imagine howling at the moon out of mystical devotion, actually respond to something far more practical. The full moon gives them the light they need to hunt in a pack with coordination and effectiveness. Without that beacon in the sky, their nocturnal strategies would change completely, becoming more cautious, more isolated, adapting to a darkness that no longer offers them any advantage. In the frozen extremes of the planet, polar bears take advantage of full moon nights to hunt seals on the ice. The silver glow allows them to spot breathing holes and detect the movement of their prey from a distance. Without that light, their ability to feed in the Arctic would be drastically reduced, adding yet another pressure on a species that already struggles to survive in a world changing too fast. Even the plant kingdom would feel the loss. Certain nocturnal flowers, with pale petals that only open after sunset, depend on moonlight to attract the moths that pollinate them. Without that light to highlight their petals in the darkness, that delicate dance would break. The flowers would remain closed or ignored, and the moths would fly blind, interrupting a cycle that has worked flawlessly for millennia. Tens of thousands of species carry in their genetic programming cycles linked to the moon. Its disappearance would be like erasing at once the metronome that sets the rhythm of wildlife. A rhythmic silence would fall over the ecosystems, where before there had been perfect choreography of births, migrations, and nocturnal feasts. And our own biology carries those marks. The approximately 28-day cycle that beats within the human body coincides, curiously, with the cycle of the moon. It is not an absolute rule, but it is a deep evolutionary echo, a reminder that our physiology was tuned under the constant influence of that celestial body hanging in the sky. In the depths of the ocean, where sunlight never reaches, life also depends on the moon. Many creatures in those zones of extreme pressure have evolved to detect the subtle changes in pressure and the faintest glimmers that the tides cause in the water column. They would lose their only connection to the surface, left isolated in a world of total darkness, without the pulse that tells them when to rise and when to stay hidden. The immense schools of fish and krill carry out a vertical migration every day, guided by the intensity of the moonlight. They rise at night toward the surface to feed and descend at dawn to escape predators. Without the moon's reference, that dance would fall into disorder. The food chain of the entire ocean, which depends on that massive movement of nutrients, would fracture, affecting everything from the tiniest plankton to the most colossal whales. In the wetlands and along riverbanks, frogs and toads would alter their songs. They usually mate on full moon nights, not only for the light, but because that visibility maintains a delicate balance between reproduction and the risk of being seen by predators. Without the moon, that balance would break, and the nocturnal choruses of the wetlands would become erratic or fall silent altogether. Even the smallest insects would become lost. Certain beetles use the polarized light of the moon as a compass to walk in a straight line at night. Without that celestial guide, they would lose their bearings, spinning in endless circles beneath the stars, exhausted and confused. And the migratory birds that cross continents at night, guided in part by the moon, would see their internal maps blur, forced to recalculate their routes on the fly, more tired and more exposed to being lost forever. And looking back to the origin of everything, the idea becomes even more profound. Many scientists believe that life on Earth would have been very difficult, perhaps impossible, to arise without the moon. The tireless pumping of the tides, that back and forth of water over the coastal rocks, was probably the engine that stirred and mixed the primordial soup until it ignited the first sparks of life. Without that movement, the water would have stagnated, and the chemistry of life might never have found the way. That is why, deep down, that promise from the beginning is literal. Without the moon, it is very possible that you would never have come to exist. Think also of the humans who lived near the sea and the forests long before electricity. Their bodies, just like those of the animals, were tuned to that double clock of the sun and the moon. They slept, hunted, celebrated, and rested, following a rhythm that the sky set for them without words. That inheritance is still inside us, hidden beneath the artificial lights that surround us today, waiting in silence for the moment of darkness when it awakens once again. And there is something moving about imagining that great biological silence. Today, on a full moon night, the natural world fills with activity. The corals spawn, the turtles swim toward the sea, the wolves hunt in packs, the moths dance around pale flowers. It is an invisible choreography, rehearsed for millions of years, that happens every night without anyone conducting it. Without the moon, that choreography would stop. Not all at once, but little by little, like an orchestra losing its conductor, whose musicians, one by one, stop playing. But nature is tenacious. Even if that clock broke, life would not surrender. It would search for new beats, new references, new ways to measure time in the darkness. Some species would go extinct, yes, but others would adapt, finding in the warmth of the sun, in the stars, or in their own internal clocks, a way to carry on. Because if the history of life on Earth has taught us anything, it is that it always, somehow, finds a way to continue. Think of the migratory birds, those tireless travelers that cross entire continents, guided by the stars and by the moon. Every autumn and every spring they set out on routes of thousands of kilometers, etched into their instinct for countless generations. The moon is one of the lights they use to navigate the blackness, a fixed reference on their internal map. Without it, that map would blur. Entire flocks could lose their way, exhaust themselves mid-journey, arrive late to the places where they nest or feed. And when one link in the migration breaks, the damage spreads throughout the entire fabric of life, something as intimate as the way many offspring come into the world would also change. Numerous species synchronize their births with the phases of the moon so that the young arrive at the safest moment when there is more food or fewer predators. Without that signal, births would scatter at random, and many offspring would arrive at the worst possible time, defenseless before a world that no longer expects them. Imagine the silence of a wetland at nightfall, that chorus of frogs and toads that today fills the air on full moon nights. It is one of the most ancient sounds on the planet, a courtship song that has repeated every spring for the birth and the slow farewell. To understand what it would mean to lose the moon, we must first travel very far back in time, long before life existed, before the oceans settled or the continents took shape. About 4.5 billion years ago, the Earth was a young, violent, and molten world. An ocean of red and orange magma covered its surface, glowing with an infernal heat beneath a dense and toxic sky. And it was in that primordial chaos that a body the size of Mars, which astronomers call Theia, approached our planet on an inevitable collision course. The impact was not a simple crash. It was a total reconfiguration of the inner solar system. The collision was so violent that it vaporized part of the Earth's crust and completely destroyed Theia. Unimaginable quantities of incandescent debris were hurled into space, forming a dense and bright ring of molten rock spinning around the Earth at dizzying speed. Over time, gravity, patient and constant, began to gather those fragments. They collided, fused, and joined together, forming a sphere of magma that, as it cooled over millions of years, solidified into the gray and silent world we see in the night sky today. Since that violent birth, the relationship between the Earth and the Moon has been a dance of distances. And here is a fact that surprises nearly everyone. The Moon is moving away from us right now at a constant and measurable rate of about 3.5 centimeters every year. This is not an assumption. It is a fact measured with precision thanks to small mirrors that astronauts left on the lunar surface. Every night, observatories fire laser pulses at those mirrors and measure the exact time it takes for the light to return, confirming that our companion is retreating, step by step, into the darkness. It may seem like an insignificant distance, but geological time turns the small into the monumental. In 1 million years, the Moon will have moved tens of kilometers farther away. It is as if, with infinite patience, it takes a step back to give us more space in the sky, a slow and elegant retreat that began on the first day and has never stopped. If we go back far enough, hundreds of millions of years ago, the Moon was much closer. Its presence in the sky was enormous, dominant, and the friction of its tides, far more intense than those of today, powerfully braked the Earth's spin. In that era, days lasted only about 21 hours. The world spun faster, storms were more frequent, and the tide swept across the continents with a fury we can barely imagine today. The moon has been, from the very beginning, the gentle break that has calmed the spin of our world. But that retreat has a written ending. In hundreds of millions of years, the moon will be so far away that its size in the sky will no longer be enough to cover the disk of the sun. Total eclipses, that sublime spectacle, will naturally cease to exist. In their place, we will see only rings of fire, where an edge of sunlight will always escape. We live without knowing it in the only era in the history of the planet when those perfect eclipses are possible. It is a gift with an expiration date. The distance that today separates us from the moon is roughly 384,000 kilometers. To grasp that void, imagine lining up 30 planet Earths, one beside another, in that space. They would fit perfectly. It is an immensity of silence, a cold abyss that separates our blue world from its gray companion, a constant reminder of the overwhelming scale of the cosmos. And yet, its presence feels enormous. The surface of the moon is equivalent, roughly, to 1/14 of the Earth's. It is as if an entire continent had been taken from us and hung in the night sky, dominating the horizon with its weight and its light. The moon has no atmosphere. There is no wind to erode its mountains, no rain to smooth its craters. Every footprint, every impact, every mark left on its surface remains intact forever. That makes it a perfect time capsule, an unaltered archive of the bombardments the early solar system endured, keeping the history of our cosmic neighborhood in absolute silence. That is why losing it would not just mean losing a light in the sky. It would mean losing the very memory of how everything we know was formed. There is also an old human story behind all of this. The story of the slow effort to measure that distance. For centuries, no one knew with certainty how far away the moon was. It took the ingenuity of astronomers who, observing it from very distant points on Earth at the same time, managed to calculate, for the first time, that abyss of hundreds of thousands of kilometers. And we knew then something astonishing, that our companion was just over 1 second away for light, a leap that a beam of light makes in a blink, but that for us would represent a journey of several days. There were also fears. Before a spacecraft touched its soil, many scientists feared that the lunar dust, accumulated over billions of years without wind to move it, was so deep and soft that the ships would sink into it like quicksand. But when the first modules descended, they discovered it was barely a layer of a few centimeters, firm and compact, capable of supporting the weight of a spacecraft and the boots of explorers. Each of those fears and discoveries was only possible because we had a real place to look at, to study, and to dream about. And even today, the exact origin of the moon continues to hold mysteries. Some lunar rocks have a composition so similar to that of the Earth that certain scientists wonder whether our companion might be, in reality, something more than a simple remnant of that collision. Perhaps it was a body that arrived from very far away and was captured by our gravity, choosing in some way to stay by our side. Whatever the truth, the moon has been accompanying us for billions of years, and tonight, as we imagine its absence, we finally understand the magnitude of that silent companionship. It is hard to imagine the violence of that birth, a collision between two worlds, one of the most colossal catastrophes our corner of the universe has ever seen. And yet, from that destruction came the companion that would make life possible. There is a beautiful lesson hidden there, that sometimes from the most terrible collisions comes the most valuable, that order can spring from chaos, and that even a cosmic collision can end up rocking, billions of years later, the sleep of a human being in their bed. Think also about how fortunate we are to be living right now. There was an era when the moon was so close it filled half the sky, enormous and overwhelming. There will be another in hundreds of millions of years when it will be so far that it will barely be a dot, no longer able to cover the sun or calm our tides. But we live in the exact moment, in that narrow window of time when the moon is the perfect size to give us total eclipses and spring tides. It is a coincidence so improbable that it almost seems like a privilege reserved only for our era. And meanwhile, it keeps moving away. 3.5 centimeters every year, in silence, without our noticing. In many generations, the human beings who look at the sky will see a moon slightly smaller than ours. They will not know it, just as we do not notice that our grandparents' moon was a little closer. But there, the proof will be, suspended above our heads, that even the things that seem most eternal are, slowly, saying goodbye. There is a detail of that birth that continues to puzzle scientists. The rocks the astronauts brought back from the moon have a composition astonishingly similar to that of the Earth, almost as if they were sisters born from the same material. That fits with the idea that the moon was formed from the debris of our own planet after the collision. But it also leaves open questions, mysteries that we can only solve by returning there, studying its soil, reading in its rocks the shared history of two worlds that were once one. And it is worth remembering everything that newborn moon did for us from the very beginning. When the Earth was a young and chaotic world, it was the moon that helped calm its spin, stabilize its axis, and create the calm and constant conditions that would allow, much later, the oceans to settle and life to take its first steps. In a certain sense, it is no exaggeration to say that the moon was the midwife of life on Earth, the invisible hand that rocked the cradle of the world until it was ready to awaken. And there is a fact that puts everything in perspective. When the moon was formed, newly born from that collision, it was so close to Earth that it filled a large part of the sky, an enormous and luminous disk dominating the horizon. Since then, over billions of years, it has been moving away without pause, shrinking little by little in our sky. The moon we see today is only one stage of that long retreat. Our most remote ancestors saw a moon larger than ours, and our distant descendants will see a smaller one. We live in a unique instant in the history of that dance, an unrepeatable frame of a farewell that lasts eons. Think also of what that newborn moon meant for the entire planet. A young Earth, without a satellite to slow it down, would have spun at dizzying speed, with days of only a few hours and perpetual storms sweeping its surface. It was the moon, with the patient friction of its tides, that gradually calmed that spin over eons, lengthening the days, softening the climate, creating the stillness necessary for the oceans to settle and life to take its first steps. Every peaceful dawn we know is, at its core, a gift of that long and silent labor. Thinking about this slow farewell teaches us something about the nature of time. We live with the illusion that the sky is a fixed backdrop, eternal and unchanging. But the moon, even now, is moving away in silence. Nothing in the universe stays still. Mountains erode, rivers change course, stars are born and die, and our companion retreats slowly toward the cold of space. And that retreat, far from being sad, is a gentle invitation to let go, to flow with time, to accept change with the same serenity with which the earth accepts the slow departure of its moon. The Beauty of a World Without the Moon, Part 1. And now, after exploring everything that would be lost, let us pause for a moment on something unexpected. Because the disappearance of the moon would not bring only darkness and silence, it would also reveal a beauty that today, quite simply, we cannot see. From the midst of that new darkness, an awe-inspiring spectacle would emerge. The moonless night sky would show up to 10 times more stars to the naked eye. Without the lunar glow that today washes out the colors of the firmament, the Milky Way would reveal itself in all its splendor. It would be so bright and so dense that it would cast soft shadows on the ground, even far from city lights. Imagine walking through an open field and seeing your own shadow drawn on the grass, not by a moon, but by the combined light of billions of distant suns. In that sky, the constellations would stop being simple drawings and become structures that seem to float at different distances. Some stars would glow with an intense blue brilliance, others with a warm orange tone, revealing their age and temperature. The sky would cease to be a ceiling and become an inverted ocean, and you would be at the bottom, looking up toward its light-filled surface. The light that reaches from those stars is cold, clean, and ancient. It has traveled through the void for thousands of years just to reach your eyes at this instant. Contemplating that immensity has a profoundly serene effect. The worries that during the day seemed enormous shrink to their real size when compared with the scale of the cosmos. The stars are silent witnesses. They were there before we existed, and they will be there long after we are gone. Their presence demands nothing of us. It only asks that we look, that we exist, and that we let ourselves be enveloped by their calm. The sonic environment would also transform. Without the constant interaction between the tides and the atmosphere, the nighttime coastal breezes would be softer. The air would feel more still, more serene, amplifying small sounds. The crack of a dry branch, the whisper of the grass, the distant hum of an insect that has adapted its song to total darkness. The night would seem longer, deeper, more silent. Even the way we sleep would change. It is known that the full moon subtly alters our rest, reducing deep sleep slightly in some people. Without it, our cycles might become more uniform, more stable, submerging us each night in a perfect and complete darkness, ideal for releasing the day and descending toward rest. And nighttime photography would find a new muse. Landscapes would no longer be bathed in the moon's bluish light, but would be illuminated by the collective glow of the entire galaxy. Imagine a mountain silhouetted against a river of stars, or a lake, reflecting the Milky Way like a second sky beneath the water. A different beauty, colder and vaster, but equally capable of taking our breath away. And think about how the experience of simply being outside at night, looking up, would change. Today, when there is a full moon, Its brightness erases the faintest stars, like a streetlight that blanks out the sky around it. But in a world without it, no light would compete with the firmament. You would see stars that today are invisible to the naked eye, layers and layers of light, until you feel the sky has depth, that you can peer into it as into an infinite well. On nights like those, even time would feel different. Without the moon moving across the sky and marking the passage of hours with its slow journey, the night would seem like a single continuous block, a serene and undivided eternity. There would be no rush. The universe would expand at its own pace, and you could expand with it, releasing the urgency of the clock, letting yourself be carried by a time that is older and kinder. Darkness, far from crushing us, would teach us to truly look. We would learn that the most beautiful things in the cosmos do not need bright light to reveal themselves, but rather the opposite. Enough stillness and shadow to let themselves be seen. And perhaps we would discover that the moonless night is not a poorer night, but a more honest one in which the entire universe shows itself as it truly is, without a single veil to soften it. Imagine being able to see, at last, the entire galaxy from your own backyard. Today, that vision is reserved for a few remote places on the planet, far from all light. But in a world without the moon, and who knows, with fewer artificial lights, that milky band of light that is the Milky Way would once again be part of the everyday life of every human being. Our ancestors saw it every night and turned it into rivers of milk, into paths of souls, into bridges to the beyond. We had forgotten that sky, and Earth without the moon would give it back to us. And with that sky, a feeling we have almost lost would return, that of pure wonder. The kind we felt as children the first time we understood how large the universe is. Looking at a sky overflowing with stars, with nothing to dim it, would put us back in our place, reminding us that we are small, yes, but also that we are part of something immense and beautiful. And there is a deep comfort in that smallness, a relief in knowing that the cosmos is so large that our problems, seen from up there, are barely a speck of dust. Perhaps, after all, one of the things the moon takes from us without meaning to is precisely that sky. Its brightness, so beautiful, erases millions of stars every night. And although we would never want to lose it, imagining its absence gives us this consoling idea that behind the light we know there is always more light waiting, and that even in the greatest of losses, a beauty we had never been able to see may be hiding. In a moonless sky, spectacles we almost never see today would return. Meteor showers, those swarms of shooting stars that cross the night, would glow with a forgotten intensity, streaking across a perfectly black sky with nothing to dim them. And on certain nights near the horizon, we might see a faint column of light, the zodiacal light, the glow of cosmic dust illuminated by the already hidden sun, a phenomenon so delicate that the moon's light almost always hides it from us. And the auroras, those veils of green and violet light that dance near the poles, would be seen with an overwhelming clarity. Without the lunar brightness washing the sky, their colors would appear more vivid, rippling over snowy landscapes like curtains of cold fire. Total darkness would become the perfect stage for the sky to display all its treasures, those that for so long remained hidden behind the glow of our old companion. There is a beautiful thought in all of this. that the very light we love so much, the moons, is also what hides the immensity of the cosmos from us, and that a world deprived of it, though lonelier, would also be a world capable of contemplating the entire universe in its maximum splendor, face to face, without a single silver veil standing between our eyes and the stars. Our first cosmic step. The history of humanity is marked by the moments when we looked up and decided to take a step toward the unknown. And almost always, that first step was taken while looking at the moon. In the summer of 1969, hundreds of millions of people around the planet gathered around flickering black and white screens. The air in the rooms was charged with a silent tension, shared by generations that had never before breathed at the same rhythm. And then, through the noise of the signal, humanity saw for the first time a human footprint pressed into the dust of another world. It was not merely a technical achievement. It was the exact moment when our species saw itself as a single thing, united by fragility and by ambition. Without the moon, that foundational instant would never have existed. A year earlier, on a Christmas Eve, another mission achieved something equally moving. While orbiting the far side of the moon, its crew gazed upon the Earth, that fragile blue marble, rising above the lunar horizon. That image of our home seen from afar changed forever the way we understand ourselves. And it was only possible because there was a physical place to travel to, a destination that forced us to look back and truly appreciate our own world. Today, that destination remains at the center of our gaze toward the future. The major space agencies have concrete plans to establish permanent bases on the lunar surface in the coming decades. Imagine the soft hum of life support systems inside a pressurized habitat, the contrast between the absolute cold of the exterior and the controlled warmth within. Without the moon, we would lose humanity's first real and sustained attempt to live continuously on another world. The moon is, moreover, a logical stepping stone toward more ambitious journeys, like the future arrival on Mars. Its gravity, 1/6 of ours, allows us to test technologies, extract resources, and resupply spacecraft with far less energy than a direct launch from Earth. Without that natural way station, the exploration of the solar system would be infinitely harder, more expensive, and much slower. And there is a special place on the moon that science yearns for, its far side, the region that never faces Earth. It is the most radio-silent spot in the solar system because the entire mass of the satellite blocks all the electromagnetic noise from our planet. There we could install telescopes capable of listening to the echoes of the oldest universe, the first signals of stars and galaxies being born, without any interference. Without the moon, we would lose that privileged ear pointed toward the origin of everything. Its soil even holds promises for the future of energy. The fine gray dust that covers the surface contains large reserves of an isotope rare on Earth, deposited by the solar wind over billions of years, that one day could power clean and safe fusion reactors. And its gravity could serve as a cosmic slingshot, a free boost the universe offers us to launch ships toward the edges of the solar system and beyond. Finally, the moon is our nearest mirror. It is the surface that teaches us how rocky worlds evolve, how they erode without wind or water, how they keep the history of cosmic impacts. It is the most accessible textbook for learning to read the language of the planets. Losing it would be like tearing out the first page of that book, just when we were beginning to understand it. Imagine, moreover, what the moon has meant for our way of dreaming the future. Every time humanity has wanted to imagine what is to come, it has looked first toward the moon. The stories, the films, the plans of engineers, all have used the moon as the first step, the dress rehearsal before the great leap toward the stars. Without it, that step would vanish, and the path toward the rest of the universe would become far steeper and lonelier. And there is something more, something we rarely think about. The moon has given us perspective. It was thanks to traveling to it that we could, for the first time, turn around and look at our own home from outside, seeing the entire Earth, small and blue, floating in the blackness, without borders drawn on its surface, changed forever the way we understand ourselves. It taught us that we share a single planet, fragile and precious. Without the moon, perhaps we would never have had that mirror, that chance to see ourselves from a distance and understand how connected we are. Imagine for a moment the silence of the far side of the moon. It is, literally, the most silent place humanity can aspire to. A sight where the constant radio murmur of our planet is blocked by the entire mass of the satellite. There, in that absolute quiet, we could finally listen to the oldest sounds of the universe, the echoes of the birth of the first stars, whispers traveling from the beginning of time. Without the moon, we would lose that giant ear aimed at the origin of everything. And think about what it would mean to stop having a first destination. Throughout all of history, the moon was the place humanity could truly aspire to reach. Not an unreachable star, but a nearby world, visible every night, that one day we were able to touch. It was the promise made flesh that we are capable of leaving home, of crossing the void, of setting foot on another world. Without it, the cosmos would once again be merely a distant backdrop, beautiful but untouchable. Imagine the lunar bases of the future, lit like small lights on the gray surface, inhabited by human beings who would look up to see, not the moon, but the entire Earth floating in the black sky. It would be the first time our species lived permanently on another world, the first real step toward ceasing to be a civilization tied to a single planet. Without the moon, that dream as old as humanity itself would vanish, and the universe would once again be beyond our reach. And think about the energy its soil could give us someday. In that gray dust, deposited by the solar wind over billions of years, there are reserves of a rare fuel on Earth, perhaps capable of powering clean reactors that would resolve our thirst for energy for millennia. The moon did not only illuminate our past, it could illuminate, in a very literal way, our future. And losing it would mean giving up a promise we were only just beginning to understand. And perhaps that is the most profound lesson of this night. The moon was never a simple ornament. It was our first teacher, our first destination, our first mirror. It taught us to count time, to cross the seas, to dream of the stars. To look at it was always, deep down, a way of looking at ourselves. The Beauty of a World Without the Moon, Part 2. And now as you imagine that sky overflowing with stars, let your body begin to release. You do not have to do anything special. Notice the weight of your body on the bed, the way gravity holds you against the mattress, the same way it holds the earth in place as it spins in the darkness. It is the same force, the same invisible hand that keeps the planets in their place, and that now keeps you, gently, anchored to rest. Look at that moonless sky in your imagination. Layers and layers of stars, some close and bright, others so distant they barely hint at themselves, forming a veil of faint light that stretches from one horizon to the other. There is no rush to count them. There is nothing to understand. Just let them be there, shining for you, while your breathing grows a little slower, a little deeper with each star that appears. In that world, without the moon, the night is darker, yes, but also more serene. Without that silver beacon moving across the sky, nothing marks the passage of hours. The night becomes a single block of calm, a soft eternity in which time seems to stop. And you can stop with it. There is no tomorrow yet. There is no yesterday. Only this moment, this gentle darkness, this sky full of ancient light that traveled thousands of years just to keep you company as you fall asleep. Feel how, little by little, your eyelids grow heavy. Do not force them to close or to open. Just let them do what their own weight asks. The starlight does not need you to watch it. It will keep shining even when you close your eyes. And perhaps, upon closing them, you will discover that the same sky is drawn inside, in the warm darkness of your own eyelids, just as vast, just as serene. The air of that imaginary night is fresh and clean. It enters slowly through your nose, fills your chest without effort, and leaves slowly, carrying with it the weight of the day. Inhale the stillness of the starlit sky. Exhale everything you no longer need to carry. Once more, inhale the calm of a sleeping world. Exhale, and sink a little deeper into the softness that holds you. Stay a moment longer beneath that imaginary sky, the most star-filled that human eyes have ever seen. There is no moonlight to dim it, so each star shines at full strength, and between them stretches that milky band, the entire galaxy, like a river of light crossing the night. Take a deep breath looking at that river, and as you let the air out, feel how a part of the weight you carry rises and dissolves among the stars. You do not have to do anything with that beauty. You do not have to photograph it, or remember it, or understand it. It is simply there, for you, offering itself in silence, just as your rest tonight is a gift you give yourself. Let it arrive without effort, the way starlight arrives, slowly, in silence, without asking permission. And if your mind is still moving, if a thought from the day still appears, imagine placing it carefully on one of those distant stars and letting it go. Let it drift away, shining toward the back of the sky until it becomes so small it no longer weighs anything. One by one, let your worries become distant lights, beautiful and harmless, suspended millions of kilometers from your warm and safe bed. Because that is what is astonishing about darkness. It is not a void to be feared. It is the canvas that allows us to see what was always there, hidden behind the moon's glow. And a world without it, though colder and lonelier, would also be a world where the entire universe would show itself, at last, without a single veil between us. Without the moon, the night would cease to be the familiar landscape we know, and would transform into something radically different. And little by little, generation after generation, we would learn to live within that new darkness, to find shelter, and even beauty in the half-light. The absence of the moon would force us to redefine our relationship with light. With the disappearance of that beacon that bathed the nights with its silver glow, every spark of light, natural or created, would acquire incalculable value. Imagine the soft crackle of a bonfire in the middle of a dark forest. The warmth of the flames would caress the skin, casting dancing shadows on the faces of those gathered around it. A single candle, with its golden flickering, would become a symbol of refuge and calm. And the distant glow of a city, seen from a hill, would no longer seem like pollution, but an archipelago of small earthly stars, human beacons guiding the way home through the blackness. That scarcity of light would create a warmer, more human intimacy. People would gather in small, protected spaces, where conversation flows in whispers and time seems to stop, freed from the rush of the day. Without the flat light of the full moon, shadows would recover their depth and their mystery, volumes that stretch and shrink to the rhythm of the fire, instead of the flat silhouettes we know today. Over the generations, even our biology could begin to change. Perhaps, in a world without the moon, human beings would develop eyes a little more sensitive, capable of capturing the faint starlight with greater efficiency. Our night vision would sharpen, allowing us to make out the soft contours of trees, the movement of the grass, the dreamlike shapes of the landscape bathed in starlight. We would learn to see the world not through blinding clarity, but through the ability to perceive what barely hints at itself in the shadows. And that adaptation would not be only physical, but also of the spirit. We would learn to find peace in total darkness without the need to fill every corner with artificial light. The silence of the night would become deeper, more respected. People would rediscover the sound of their own breathing, the beating of their heart, the whisper of the wind, without the distraction of an illuminated sky. The half-light would become a sanctuary, a space where the mind can rest from the constant stimuli of the day and immerse itself in stillness. Human instinct, however, would not be erased. The moon taught us, throughout all our history, to look up. That gesture, tilting the head toward the sky, searching for answers, comfort, or simple beauty, is already etched in the deepest part of us. Even if the night sky emptied of its brightest celestial body, the habit of raising our gaze would remain intact, pushing us to keep exploring, to keep asking what lies beyond, to chart maps of constellations that would now shine with a clarity never before seen. Human curiosity will always be stronger than darkness. Customs would transform as well, where before we celebrated the phases of the moon, communities would gather to honor the solstices, the equinoxes, the passage of the great constellations across the top of the sky. The silence of the night would be valued as an essential resource, a time for introspection, for calm, and for deep rest. The absence of light would invite us to look inward, to value the word, the touch, and shared presence above visual stimuli. That ancient inheritance lives on in us. When we turn off the lights and prepare for sleep, we repeat, on a small scale, that millennial ritual of returning to the fire, of seeking the safety of darkness, and allowing the body to surrender to rest. The history of the night is, at its core, the history of our capacity to find peace in the unknown, to turn the void into a canvas of possibilities, and to trust that, upon closing our eyes, the world will keep spinning in our favor. Over time, even our cities would change their shape. Without the moonlight that for centuries guided the nighttime traveler, we would learn to light our paths with a more careful, more conscious warmth, valuing each lamp, each bonfire, each lit window as a small miracle of companionship in the immense darkness. And we would learn something even deeper, that the light that truly matters does not always come from outside. In a world without the moon, people would turn inward, toward the warmth of home, toward the quiet conversation, toward the silent presence of those we love. The outer darkness would make, by contrast, everything warm we carry inside shine brighter. Perhaps that is why, when we imagine that world, we feel not only fear, but also a strange tenderness, because it reminds us that true calm never depended on the sky, but on our capacity to find shelter, to create light where there is none, to curl up in the night and trust that dawn will come. That is a lesson darkness teaches better than anything else. Think about what gatherings would look like in that world. Entire families congregated around a fireplace, neighbors sharing the glow of a single bonfire, travelers guiding themselves from village to village by the distant lights of windows. Darkness, far from separating us, would bring us together. It would make us seek the closeness of other bodies, the warmth of other voices, the security of not being alone before the immensity of the night. In a way, a darker world could also be a more human world, and our senses would awaken. When sight is no longer enough, the rest of the body sharpens. We would learn to listen better, to smell the change in the air, to feel the texture of the ground under our feet, to perceive the presence of another before seeing them. We would recover a more ancient and more complete way of inhabiting the world, that of someone who does not only look, but truly feels the place where they are. Perhaps that is why, when we imagine that world in half-light, what we feel is not only loss, but a rare nostalgia for something we have never lived. The nostalgia for the deep nights our ancestors knew, for a silence without noise, for a darkness in which the body truly rested. And that same darkness awaits us every night when we turn off the light and prepare, as now, to surrender ourselves to sleep. Over the centuries, even our stories would change. The tales told by the warmth of the fire would no longer speak of werewolves howling at the full moon, or of lovers meeting beneath its light. New legends would arise, myths of a different sky, stories of stars and darkness that future generations would tell one another, the way we tell the old tales of the moon today. The tireless human imagination would fill that hole in the sky with stories never before dreamed. And perhaps we would learn, at last, to value the darkness. We live in a world that fears it, that fights it with lights everywhere, that barely leaves it a corner. But on an earth without the moon, darkness would return to the place it deserves, not as an enemy, but as a rest, a refuge, a mantle beneath which the entire world can finally stop and breathe. The same darkness that now, gently, begins to enfold you. And while you imagine humanity learning to live in that half-light, let your own body learn the same, to rest in the darkness, without fear. The forest, the lake, and the abyss. Imagine now that you walk into the interior of an ancient forest, one of those where the trees rise like columns of a natural cathedral, with trunks so wide that several people could not encircle them with their arms. By day, it is a mosaic of lights and shadows. But at night, and especially in a world without the moon, the forest transforms into a realm of serene and tangible darkness. That darkness beneath the canopy of trees is not just the absence of light. It is a physical presence, dense and humid, that clings to the skin like a second layer of fresh air. It smells of wet earth, of leaves slowly decomposing on the ground, of that sweet and earthy touch of life recycling itself in silence. It is an ancient smell, the smell of a world that breathes slowly. Without the moonlight, sight becomes almost useless, but hearing sharpens. You listen to the sound of a single drop of water falling from a fern onto a dry leaf, with a soft, muffled click. Higher up, the wind moves the crowns of the tallest trees, creating a continuous and deep whisper, like the sound of the sea heard from very far away, a constant melody that lulls the entire forest. The life of this place has learned to move without the silver beacon. An owl glides between the branches in absolute silence, its wings designed to cut the air without the slightest turbulence. It does not need to see the ground to know where its prey is. It senses the slightest vibrations through the feathers on its face. And on the ground, beneath your feet, an invisible network of roots and fungi exchanges nutrients and messages in a silent language that has existed since before animals walked the earth. There is nothing to fear in this darkness. It is a fertile, protective darkness, one that wraps everything in a mantle of rest. The trees do not grow at night. They only rest, saving their energy, waiting for the return of the sun. And you can allow your own mind to resemble that damp, tranquil soil, where nothing is demanded, where everything is accepted, and where the only movement is that of your slow breathing in the wind and the heights. Now imagine that you leave the forest and descend into the depths of the ocean, to a place where sunlight has never reached. Here, without the force of the tides stirring the layers above, the deep sea is a place of almost supernatural stillness. The water is dense, cold, and heavy, and there are no violent currents or the chaos of surface storms. Only a slow and majestic flow, like blood moving slowly through the veins of a sleeping giant. In that blackness, suddenly, a soft, bluish glow appears. It is a school of deep-water jellyfish, pulsing with a cold and rhythmic light. They move with lazy grace, opening and closing in an unhurried dance, set to an internal beat that needs neither the sun nor the moon. Their light does not illuminate the ocean. It only traces their own shapes in the darkness, like lanterns floating on a windless night. And far away, the deep songs of whales travel hundreds of kilometers, filling the void with a deep and comforting presence. And, finally, imagine a mountain lake, surrounded by dark pines. Without the moon, its surface is a perfect mirror, so smooth it reflects the starlit sky with an overwhelming clarity. The Milky Way doubles itself in the water, and for an instant it seems the lake is a window into another universe identical to our own. There is no wind to wrinkle the surface. The water has forgotten how to move with force, and in its place has learned the art of absolute stillness. And as you imagine it, let your body begin to resemble those calm landscapes. Let your breathing become as slow as the wind among the pines. Let your thoughts float and dissolve like the jellyfish in the abyss. Let your mind quiet itself until it becomes as smooth as the surface of that mountain lake beneath the stars. There is nothing you must do now. There are no paths to walk, no decisions to make, nothing to solve. Only the stillness of the rock, the distant murmur of the water, and the deep calm of a world that has found its balance and that invites you, softly, to share it. Stay a moment longer in the forest before moving on. Feel the fresh humidity of the air on your face, the aroma of earth and wood, the soft ground beneath your feet. There is no path you must find, no destination you must reach. You are simply here among the sleeping trees, forming part of the calm that envelops everything. The forest asks nothing of you. It only offers its stillness and invites you to take from it everything you need. And in the depths of the ocean, in that serene darkness, a comforting truth also rests, that life does not need light to exist, nor noise to have meaning. That there are entire kingdoms of the planet that thrive in silence, in stillness, far from all rush. Your own depths, those that during the day churn with worries and thoughts, can also find that state. They can sink, slowly, to a place where the pressure of the world dissolves, and only the tranquil buoyancy of rest remains. Now imagine one last landscape, a snowy plain beneath a sky thick with stars. The snow, untouched, stretches in every direction, barely shimmering with the faint light of the firmament. The air is cold and utterly pure, so clean that each breath seems to wash you from within. There is no wind, there is no sound, only the immense and white silence of a world asleep beneath winter, a stillness so complete it can almost be touched. In that silence, there is nothing to fear. The snow, the forest, the deep ocean, and the mountain lake all teach you the same lesson, that rest is the natural state of things, that the entire world, every night, stops to recover, and that you too have permission to do the same. You do not have to hold anything. You do not have to watch over anything. Just let yourself fall, slowly, into the stillness that already surrounds you. Return for a moment to the mountain lake, that perfect mirror beneath the stars. Remember that, without the moon, its surface has forgotten how to stir and knows only absolute stillness. Let your mind become like that lake. Each thought that arrives is only a small ripple on the surface, appearing, spreading, and vanishing, until the water is smooth again, serene, perfect. Do not chase those thoughts. Just watch them dissolve and return to the stillness of the water. And remember also the dark forest, where life has learned to move in silence without the need of the lunar light. There, everything rests. The trees save their energy. The animals sleep in their burrows. The earth itself seems to breathe slowly. Allow yourself to become part of that sleeping forest. Your body, like the trees, does not need to do anything tonight. Only be, rest, and wait in calm for the distant return of the sun. In the depths of the ocean we imagined, where light never reaches, the creatures move with a serene slowness, held by the dense and tranquil water. That is how you can feel your own body now. completely held, weightless, without effort, floating in the warm darkness of your room the way those creatures float in the deep waters. There is no up or down. There is no rush or direction. Only buoyancy, only calm, only rest. Let your body rest as that mountain lake rests, that surface of water that, without the moon, has forgotten forever how to stir. Your chest rises and falls barely as the lake breathes beneath the stars. Your hands rest, still, like stones at the bottom of the water. And your mind, that mind that during the day never stops moving, finds at last the same smooth and perfect stillness of the sleeping lake. As you contemplate that lake, you can allow your own mind to become like that surface of water. Let the waves of thoughts, worries, and tasks of the day settle slowly until the surface of your consciousness is perfectly smooth, reflecting only calm, ready to receive the deep rest the night offers. The forest rests, the ocean rests, the lake rests, and you, in this moment, can also allow yourself that same luxury of stillness. The descent into sleep. The transition into sleep is the most natural and ancient act in the world. It is the moment when the body, after meeting the demands of the day, decides to release control and surrender itself to gravity. In a world without the moon's light, without anything to interrupt the darkness, that process becomes even softer, more fluid, like sliding down a velvet slope into a valley of absolute calm. Feel the texture of the sheets against your skin. Cool at first, but soon they absorb the warmth of your body, creating a perfect microclimate, warm and safe. The weight of the blanket over your legs and your chest is not a burden, but a comforting pressure, like a firm embrace that tells your nervous system there is nothing left to watch over, that the environment is safe, that you can allow yourself to rest completely. Your breathing begins to change. It becomes slower, deeper. The air enters through your nose, fresh and clean, and exits slowly through your mouth, carrying away any tension you may have stored in your shoulders, your neck, or your jaw. With each exhalation, you feel your muscles loosening, sinking a little deeper into the mattress, letting the earth hold you with all its silent strength. Imagine that your body is a leaf that has fallen onto the surface of a completely still lake. There is no wind. There are no currents. The water is dense, warm, and perfectly stable. The leaf does not sink, nor struggle, nor move. It simply floats, held by the water, in a state of absolute calm. That is how your body rests right now on the mattress, which yields slightly under your weight, adapting to the curve of your back, to the shape of your shoulders, without a single pressure point. Feel how a pleasant heaviness begins to spread from the tips of your toes. It is a dense and warm heaviness, as if your muscles were made of fine sand settling slowly at the bottom of a vessel. That sensation climbs slowly through your ankles, your calves, your knees. Your shoulders, which carried the tension of the day, finally give in, sinking a little deeper into the pillow. The jaw loosens, the tongue rests without effort, and the small muscles around your eyes, those that focus ceaselessly during the day, relax completely, letting the eyelids feel heavy, warm, and sealed by a deep calm. In this state, the mind stops seeking stimuli. Without the moon's shifting shadows, without the roar of the tides, the environment becomes monotonous in the best sense of the word, because monotony is the medicine of the nervous system. The sound of your own breathing becomes the only anchor point, soft and rhythmic, like the sway of an ancient pendulum in a silent room. Inhale calm, exhale the day. Inhale stillness, exhale what you no longer need. Your heart beats with a slow and steady rhythm, a soft drum that sets the tempo of your rest. It is an ancient rhythm, older than words, older than thoughts. Your body knows exactly what it has to do. It knows how to regulate your temperature, how to repair your tissues, how to cleanse your mind. Your only task now is not to interfere, to release control, to allow the wisdom of your own body to guide you towards sleep. And if you wish, you can imagine something comforting. Imagine the moon has not gone entirely. That, instead of disappearing, it has simply changed form. That it has merged with the darkness that surrounds you, dissolving its silver edges until it has become part of the air you breathe. That its presence, instead of shining from above, now embraces the earth from all sides, wrapping it in a warm and protective silence. An embrace that weighs nothing, that asks for nothing, that is simply there, holding the planet on its journey through the night, and holding you in this instant of stillness. The air that enters your lungs is fresh and clean. The air that leaves carries with it the last remnants of wakefulness, leaving your interior in a state of crystalline calm. Your thoughts, if they still appear, are like clouds crossing a night sky. They arrive, float for a moment, and dissolve without a trace, without your needing to make any effort to push them away. You simply watch them pass and return to the sensation of your body resting. Imagine that your mind is a large room with soft, rounded walls, lit by a warm light that is gradually dimming. In that room there is no furniture, no memories of the day, no task lists. There is only space, a clean, empty, and peaceful space. With each breath, the light lowers a little more, becoming more golden, closer to the color of amber, until it finally goes out, leaving only a comfortable and safe darkness. The body, upon feeling completely safe, drops its temperature by barely a fraction of a degree, an ancient signal that the time has come to shut down. The skin feels cool beneath the sheets, while the center of the body remains warm and protected. It is the perfect balance, the exact state in which the brain begins to generate those slow, deep waves of sleep that truly repairs. There is nothing left to think about, nothing to plan, nothing to remember. Only this moment, this surface that holds you, this kind darkness that wraps you like a second skin. Notice how, with each passing minute, it becomes harder to know where your body ends and the bed begins. The boundaries blur. The frontier between you and the softness that holds you becomes thinner and thinner until there is no effort, no weight, nothing left to hold. You simply float, completely held, completely surrendered. Think, if you wish, of the entire earth spinning slowly in the darkness of space, carrying you with it. While you rest, the planet completes its journey in silence with a precision it has maintained for billions of years. You do not have to do anything for that to happen. The universe takes care of spinning, of orbiting, of sustaining. Your only task tonight is to let yourself be carried by that ancient and safe movement, like a sleeping child in the arms of someone carrying them to bed. And as your breathing grows ever slower, deeper, more spaced, you feel there is no longer a frontier between being awake and being asleep. Sleep does not arrive all at once. It approaches like the softest tide in the world, covering you little by little without your having to go to meet it. You only have to remain here, still, warm, safe, and let that silent tide cover you completely. Feel now how a warm wave of calm runs through your body, starting at the crown of your head and descending very slowly. Relax the forehead, the eyebrows, the eyelids. Let that wave descend through your face, your neck, releasing each small muscle in its path. It continues through the shoulders, the arms, the hands, to the tips of the fingers. And it keeps descending through the chest, the abdomen, the legs, until your entire body is loose, heavy, and warm, sinking gently into the surface that holds it. Let your breathing now be like that gentle tide we described at the beginning, the tide of the sea in a world without the moon, a slow, lazy back and forth, without effort. The air enters like water rising slowly up the sand, and exits like water returning without rush to the ocean. Inhale like the rising tide. Exhale like the retreating tide. And in between, in that silent pause, rest. There are almost no words left now, only the distant sound of my voice, which little by little becomes part of the silence. You do not have to listen. You do not have to understand. Just remain here, floating in this warm and gentle darkness, while the tide of sleep rises, slowly, until it covers you completely. Once more, without rush, bring your attention to your breathing, that gentle tide of a world without the moon. Do not change it. Do not force it. Just accompany it. The air enters, slow, like the laziest wave rising up the sand. The air exits, slow, like that same wave retreating toward the sea. And in the small pause between one and the next, rest, float, let go a little more. Feel again how your entire body is heavy, warm and loose, sinking into the mattress. The feet, heavy. The legs, heavy. The abdomen, rising and falling without effort. The chest, open and tranquil. The shoulders, which at last release what they carried all day. The neck, the jaw, the forehead, everything loosens, everything softens, everything surrenders to the gentleness of the night. And return, if you wish, to that comforting idea. The moon has not gone. It has dissolved into the darkness and now surrounds you from all sides, embracing you with a warm silence. It does not shine from above, but wraps you, like a blanket made of night, like arms that weigh nothing. You are held. You are cared for. You do not have to do anything to deserve it. Just receive it. The earth keeps spinning, slowly, carrying you through the darkness to the other side of the night. You do not have to steer that journey. You do not have to stay awake to watch over it. The planet knows the way. It has traveled it billions of times. You are simply a beloved passenger, rocked by its gentle spin, held by its gravity, protected by its atmosphere. Let yourself be carried. Trust. And that is all for tonight. Sometimes we think darkness is only the absence of light, an empty space to be filled or feared. But in traveling through these ideas and imagining a world where the night is absolute and deep, we discover that, in the cosmos, darkness is simply the canvas that allows us to see what was always there. The moon taught us to look at the sky, to measure time, and to feel accompanied in the vastness. It taught us to look up. But it is the stars, shining with a new clarity in its absence, that remind us we belong to something much greater, something that operates with a silent harmony and that sustains us, asking nothing in return in every second of our existence. And if there is something I take from this long journey, something I would like to leave with you before you fall asleep, it is this. We spend our lives surrounded by silent presences that sustain us without our ever thanking them. The moon, which calms the seas and steadies the axis of the world. Gravity, which keeps us bound to the earth without our having to think about it. The patient spinning of the planet, which brings the day and carries away the night. Things so constant, so faithful, that we stop seeing them. And only by imagining their absence do we understand how much we owe them, how much they were doing for us while we looked the other way. Perhaps that is the true lesson of this night, that you do not have to lose something to learn to love it, that we can choose right now to feel gratitude for all those invisible things that sustain us. The air you breathe without effort, the roof that covers you, the heartbeat that continues its course without your having to ask. Just as the moon sustains the earth, 1,000 small and silent things are sustaining you in this instant, and all of them, without exception, are on your side. And we learn something more, something that consoles, that even the greatest loss hides an unexpected beauty, that a sky without the moon would not be an empty sky, but a sky finally full of stars, that behind what we lose almost always, something waits that we had never been able to see. That is why there is no need to fear the darkness, nor the changes, nor the goodbyes. Deep down, everything in the universe transforms, moves away, and begins again, and still, somehow, it keeps taking care of us. There is something in all of this that stays with you, a quiet feeling that settles in the chest. The idea that even in the most extreme scenarios, even if the skies changed completely, the earth would still be our home. A resilient world that continues its journey in silence, rocking on the invisible tide of time. And you are part of that story. Your rest tonight is a small echo of that cosmic balance, a moment in which you align with the slow and steady rhythm of the planet. If this journey has kept you company, if these words have brought a little calm to your mind, let me know in the comments when you have a moment, without any rush. Was there something that surprised you tonight? Some image of the still sea or the starlit sky that lingered with you? There is no urgency. The comments will be there, waiting, but right now they are not important. The only thing that matters now is the feeling of your body on the mattress, the softness of the sheets, the slow rhythm of your heart. If you enjoy this kind of content, this space made so the outside world switches off and you can rest, subscribe. Only if you want to. No commitment, no noise. Just a silent link so that, when night falls again, you know there is a place where calm is the only protagonist. Now, let these words fade. Imagine my voice slowly drifting away, like the sound of footsteps disappearing into a snowy forest, leaving behind only a pure and perfect silence. You do not need to retain anything you have heard. Your mind has already done its work, storing the calm and letting go of the rest. Feel how your eyelids are heavy, so heavy that keeping them closed is the most natural thing in the world. The room is silent. The house is silent. The entire world is silent. The earth keeps spinning, carrying you through the night, protecting you with its atmosphere, holding you with its gravity. There is nothing you must do. There is nowhere you must go. There is only this instant, suspended in time, where rest wraps you like a thick, warm blanket. Allow yourself to fall into that softness. Allow yourself to float in the gentle darkness that surrounds you. Sleep awaits you, deep, restorative, and serene, like an ocean at rest beneath an infinitely starlit sky. Good night.